This is the Wide Format Impressions broadcast.
Welcome back to the broadcast. I'm Dan Marks. Where are you? Where have you been? And where are you going? Regardless of the philosophical depth of these questions, they're also key questions for any business, because without a roadmap to reference, or a star to follow, or data to help define your position, these questions cannot be answered. But industry data can answer these questions and others. So to help us understand the business value of quality industry data, we welcome Nathan Safran, Vice President, Research, Alliance Insights. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So to start, Alliance Insights. I know I've heard the name and you've heard the name, but a lot of our listeners likely haven't. What is Alliance Insights?
Sure. So Alliance Insights is actually the new name for what has really long been known as NAPCO Research. And many of your readers, Dan, probably have seen some of the research that we've put out there under the NAPCO Research brand. And we recently decided to shift the branding to Alliance Insights. But we're essentially the research and data arm of PRINTING United Alliance. And we're the group that produces the market intelligence, forecasts, insight that really helps your readers, print service providers, and the wider ecosystem at large to be able to make better decisions, right? And so what we're trying to do is to really turn anecdote into evidence, right? There's folks that are out there talking about things or saying, here's what's happening or here's a trend. And what we try to do is validate if that trend is happening, to the extent it's happening, track it over time, and just give the industry what they need to be able to make intelligent decision making.
And just quickly, what is your background in this field?
Sure. So I spent a bunch of years working at Forrester Research as an analyst on consumer product strategy. I spent a bunch of years at a marketing technology company building up their research and thought leadership practice at a time where that was relatively new. And I've been here at the Alliance it'll be 10 years in April. And it's been a great ride, learning about the print industry and really built a great research and economics team and just building out research and pushing the envelope every year.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on the broadcast is to discuss the value of good, reliable data. And I know Alliance Insights does a lot of projects related to the printing industry and some very specific to the wide format segment, which is what is sort of our focus here. But I'm not sure everybody understands the value it can bring. So what is the reason for collecting and analyzing this data for the industry?
Yeah, sure. As I alluded to earlier, so often, in particular in this industry, there's a dearth of data, of insight, and people are operating on either hunches or conversations they have or what they think is happening. And, really even starting the division 10 years ago, that was the objective, is to try to bring some data and insight and actual numbers to that process, to the decision-making process. So some examples of some things we've done around market size and growth expectations, adoption of new technologies such as like automation, workflow, AI, business model diversification, which is a hot topic, I'm sure, for your readers, Dan, around getting into other areas that might produce more revenue and make for a more sticky customer. And the reason we do this really is because businesses that are competing in today's environment, they need more than instinct, right? They need reliable, objective, and current data. And I think we're uniquely positioned as an objective third party and as an association to be able to, we don't have skin in the game, so to speak. We're just looking at what the numbers tell us and reporting on them.
Now, you have kind of alluded to this, but I think business people and small business people in general often operate on instinct or hunches. And in some cases, they've built a successful business up from the ground up based on that. But I think there is probably a growing pains point where the quick and easy money is done and you have to start sailing your ship based on the stars and the constellations instead of just going off into the void. They might have a sense of certainty about what they're doing, but they don't really have a factual or quantitative underpinning. So can you give me an example or two of a time where it took data to really prove a strong hunch?
Yeah, for sure. That's a very good question. The first example that comes to mind is, we've talked a lot on wide format impressions and some of the other properties that we have around the idea of convergence that's occurring. I know, Dan, you've written a lot about it. That's occurring in the print industry, which basically means where printers are diversifying into adjacent markets. And as far
Mhm.
back as 2017, that's exactly how it started. Is folks were saying, well, this is anecdotally, I'm hearing this a lot. I'm at events and people are telling me, and some of the vendors are telling us about the phenomenon, but there
Mhm.
was no research that was out there on the degree to which it was happening, where people are going, how they're doing it, right? So we did our first convergence study in 2017, and just a quick data point, as of our latest one, we showed that more than 90% of print service providers are either already investing in or are planning on investing in applications outside of their core segment, right? So
Mhm.
we started in 2017 validating that it's happening. Then in 2021, we followed up that study that showed, are people making the investment, right? It's more, so they're looking at it, they're thinking about it, but are they investing in equipment to be able to get into other segments? And in 2021, we validated that, yes, that is in fact happening. And now we're right in the middle of our latest study, which will be published by the end of the year,
Mhm.
that is going to show outcomes, right? Like, so you said you're going to do it, you invested in it, what happens, right? What were
Mhm.
some of the outcomes that you saw, both on positive and potentially negative? So that's a great example of where we had a hunch and we validated it very much that it's happening and we're taking it to the next level. And a second example, if I can, is within your own segment, wide format providers. We did some research that showed that format providers thought that promotional products were quote unquote on the radar, but small. And actually, some of the research that we did showed double-digit revenue growth for service providers who added promo products, right? So that was confirming not just their interest, but a real ROI that was returning to them. So those are two examples of where we had a hunch that we validated.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a really compelling case. In promo, I know Lisa Cross presented some data on wide format use of automation technologies recently. And I think one thing that was surprising out of that is it's one of those things where everybody wants to do it, everybody plans to do it, but the number of people who have actually pulled the triggers and made investments on that was much, much smaller. That really kind of gives a sense of reality as well. I did want to bring up something else about convergence, and I was just digging around in the data from our wide format impressions 150 list, which just came out last month, and was looking at, of those 150 companies, how many of them get 100% of their revenue from wide format services. Would you have a guess?
100%.
So go ahead.
100% that get 100% of their revenue from wide format. I would guess 60% maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. The number that get 100% was there were 22 of the 150. And if
Wow.
you talk about the fact that, these wide format providers are in other spaces, and we have data of who's doing, offset, who's in packaging segment, who's doing apparel, and that diversity across formerly traditional silos is growing, and it really is profound. So that was pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Hey, I think another way the Alliance Insights has been really invaluable and very recently has been in sort of capturing and making sense of how PSPs are using artificial intelligence. And, it's such a fast developing space. Everybody has opinions about it. There are detractors and promoters, but trying to get down to brass tacks and saying, well, what are these people doing? Are they making plans to integrate it, to use it? So can you give some examples of a couple of data points that came out of that research that have been either surprising or illuminating to you?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. And Dan, I'm glad you brought that up because actually we are completing our second iteration of that study, which will be released this month. And we're very excited about that. We're pushing the envelope, and we've heard a lot from folks in the industry, your readership, about what it was that they wanted to see in this second version. But let me start with a couple of data points. So first of all,
Sure.
60% are experimenting or using AI tools in some form, right? Which is higher than expected. Some of the top use cases we saw were around content creation, design assistance, and workflow automation, which not terribly surprising, right? It dipped the toe in the water and the low hanging fruit. But what's super interesting, and I won't overwhelm your listenership with numbers, but many are looking at more advanced uses of AI, such as forecasting and customer service and really pushing the envelope. So what I see out of that is there's a starting to use it, dipping the toe in the water, getting comfortable. There's absolutely an awareness, I can tell you this quantitatively and qualitatively as well, that there's a need to use AI, right? There's an awareness that you can become more productive, you can get more insight, right? There's very much an awareness around that. As far as a surprising finding, the biggest barrier actually is not skepticism, right? It's people understand they need to do it, but it's training and integration. It's like many are overwhelmed. Where do I start? How do I use it? I know that, across all different departments, there are use cases, but where do I start? It's just overwhelming, right? And so one of the things that we did with this study, and we heard that feedback, is we did a lot of case studies and a lot of this is how this particular customer is using it in a unique and cutting edge way, right? And a lot of tools that we're providing and checklists and things like that to help folks to get started. But one last data point, if I can.
Sure.
This one was powerful to me, that service providers who embrace AI early are already reporting time savings and efficiency gains, sometimes freeing up 10 to 20% of staff time on routine tasks. So those that go through the blood, sweat, and tears, they're seeing their returns in a substantial way.
Wow. I think it's such an amazing wave of new technology and new opportunities coming from AI that it really is kind of mind-boggling. And I think of that sort of, acceptance curve that you always see about new technologies. And in your opinion, is it going sort of in hyperspeed? Is acceptance happening faster with AI than it has with, let's say, other new technologies, or is it tracking about the same?
Oh my gosh, Dan, I've been covering technology in various forms for, 25, 30 years. And, I was at Forrester for the introduction of a lot of different cutting edge technology. And this is the fastest adoption curve I've ever seen. I think I would argue we'll ever see in our lifetime, because it's so far reaching.
Yeah.
There's not, you can go on YouTube, or you can go to and do a training course on ChatGPT for accountants, or ChatGPT for marketing, or for content, or, there's such broad use cases. My kids use it, like I had this thought not long ago. It occurred to me that like I've stopped Googling things. Like I just ChatGPT, Claude it, whatever. And I was having conversation at a wedding the other night, and somebody said that exact line to me. So, and I think that's a good way of explaining what's happening. And I think if I can offer a bit of advice to your listenership, it's that, treat AI as amongst the most critical things that your organization has to do. So you've got to market, right? You got to have a sales team. You got to have a customer service team. You got to be figuring out AI and have a focus on it and educating and always just be growing in it. And there's a learning curve for everything, but I don't want to give away too much. But the research that we're going to have, one of the things we're going to do is show what the leaders of AI are doing. What are they doing, and what are the benefits they're getting as to differentiate from the others. I hope I'll get down off my soapbox, but that's really the advice I would offer to your folks that are listening today.
Yeah, just one more thing on AI, and I this is my opinion, but I think it's moving very quickly out of the novelty phase of like, look at this cool thing I can do, to being integrated into, in not long, every aspect of our lives. And it's not that you will have a choice or make the decision to say, oh, I'm going to use AI. You just will be.
Absolutely. And I think that, what you asked earlier about adoption, I think what you just raised is like a really good follow on to that question and answer, right? Because first you asked about adoption, and is the adoption rate faster? And yes, but what's also faster than anything we've ever seen is the degree and rate to which AI is growing and advancing, right? And we're talking about months. Like in months, things are completely different and capabilities completely different every day. Where, the major AI companies that we're all familiar with, right, is one thing, but even the smaller folks that are out there and coming up with new interesting use cases for AI, like even like Microsoft Word in a year from now will not look anything like it does today. It'll just be PowerPoint. It'll just have so many AI features in it. So I think you're right on the money with that, Dan.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. So I know we're talking to you for this podcast, but I also know you have a great team operating under the umbrella at Printing United Alliance that works with you. So can you tell me a little bit about the research and economics team?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, we have a line in my organization that goes something like, my team is the brains of the operation. I'm just the handsome face. And, they really are an amazing team. So starting with Lisa Cross, who you mentioned, Dan, and many of folks listening today have either seen her speak at conferences, seen her articles, her videos. She's been in the industry for 25 plus years in the print space. She's a principal analyst. She leads projects across the various print segments that we have, and she brings both vision and execution. Corey Francer, he's the former editor-in-chief of our Packaging Impressions publication. So he knows a great deal about packaging, but he knows about other print segments as well. And he's an analyst on our team, and he writes reports, works with clients, delivers presentations across multiple verticals. We're also very blessed to have Andy Paparazzi, who I'm sure your readership knows him. He's our chief economist at Printing United Alliance and has been in the industry for many years, well-known, well-respected, in addition to being a wonderful human being.
Love that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. So he handles, for those that have seen the state of the industry research that we put out, he drives that research, and he's also an economist, as I mentioned, and does forecasts and economic modeling and all of that. And he's a great speaker as well. And then working alongside him is Onamika Dar, who's an economist. She works alongside Andy and handles a lot of the economic research and member-facing insights. And then kind of the wizard behind the scenes is Evan West, who is our data analyst. And he, like I said, he's more behind the scenes. He handles a lot of the analysis and programming surveys and, the charts that we have that look great and all that stuff, and producing visualization. So I think we have a great team because it's a mix of personalities, first of all, and second of all, a mix of expertise and various degrees of time within the industry. We cover both the industry itself specifically, but for those that are running the business, right, and need to understand how the economy can and does impact their business and what does it look like for the future. So I think we have a well-rounded team that I think can really help service providers to run their businesses.
Yeah. And I think that addition of economic insight, the fact that we are part of a broader economy, both national economies, world economies, we aren't just out there alone saying, hey, we're printing. Like, we are affected by things. And I think the last several years have taught us that very, very well. I know you all work on standalone research studies, but you also do repeating periodic reports that result in really good longitudinal data. Can you describe these and explain how a PSP would use them to make more informed decisions?
Sure. So I touched a moment ago, Dan, on the state of the industry research that we put together that Andy and his team drives. And that's based off of surveying a dedicated research panel of wide format service providers, which is very, very important because you're talking to the same people from one quarter to the next. And so as he's asking them things like, what are your sales doing, up or down? What are your orders doing? What's your volume look like? What's your sales team look like? And all these leading indicators that would give folks reading his reports insight into what's happening within their industry, right? And again, you can gain that stuff anecdotally, but when you have quarter over quarter, the same people reporting with the same questions that he's asking, it can be extremely valuable in understanding what's happening in the industry. And it could be a lonely world out there running your business, right? So understanding what's happening in the industry with your colleagues and sometimes your competition can be very valuable. There's that. And as you alluded to, there's layering on of the economy. So he layers on top of that data that he collects from his dedicated research panels, he's layering on economic information. So a topic that's been particularly hot these days, as I'm sure you're aware, is tariffs, right? So he does a lot on that. And he asks service providers, how are you being affected by the tariffs? In addition, he brings in the broader global economic data and his expertise and his research that he and Onamika do, and layers that on top of what we're being told. So you can see just by the description, I think, how valuable it can be. But, ways that folks can use it, I mentioned, benchmarking against peers, a revenue mix, what does your revenue mix look like relative to your peers? What do your profit margins look like? What are your peers doing as it relates to technology adoption? right? So here's an example. If a service provider is considering entering packaging,
Hmm.
you can compare your growth curve to your peers who have already diversified, right? Like that's one example that I can provide, but hopefully that gives a sense to those that are listening, some of the things that we're doing and the ways it could be helpful.
And just kind of talking about data, it gives you the ability to measure and understand, but it also becomes kind of a factor in accountability. Like I think a company with no benchmarks or KPIs or other measures, as a business owner, you're never wrong, but you're never right either.
Right.
You're lost or you're kind of in a void, correct?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. I'm gonna steal that one, Dan. It's exactly right. Without benchmarks, in reality, every business decision is anecdotal, right? So, and it's just an uncomfortable feeling making decisions without really knowing, having a sense of how it impacted, others in the industry, right? It provides accountability. It also helps leaders to know if their investments are actually performing. And if they're not, are they not performing for your peers? Is that a you issue type of thing? It gives your employees clarity about what success looks like. And with KPIs that are in place, you can't change what you're not measuring. So with KPIs that are in place, a business can really pivot quickly when things are not working, right? Like there's this expression I heard once, it's failure isn't final, it's feedback,
Hmm.
right? So you're getting feedback on what's working. And then of course, outside stakeholders such as banks, investors, partners, etc. So yeah, and I think one of the things, Dan, that I've really worked hard on in my time here is sometimes I feel as though we might be the best kept secret. And for that reason, I'm grateful for you having us. And I want to make sure, and I know you do too, that folks know about what's available to them,
Hmm.
right? And that they're able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, it is great stuff. Anytime I dig into those, I come out with some sort of takeaways I can write about or explore or just even take time to consider. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about forecasting. So during the time I spent working on industry research, I found it frustrating that we were able to report on the past and even on the present, whatever the present is. But what people really wanted insight into was the future. So layman's terms, how do you, as a business owner, take the past and present data and use it to make some sort of a forecast?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would start by saying for some of that stuff, you can and should rely on experts who have the forecasting ability, data, et cetera, at their fingertips. And that is a plug for the Alliance and for
Hmm.
Andy and his team. But for good reason, where it's hard to do well. So when we talk about forecasting, right, like one of the things I want to point out is that what we're talking about forecasting, we're talking about patterns, not predictions. So many people predict the future, but it's not worth so much. But what a good forecast does is looks at historical performance, current investment trends. So for example, where are print service providers putting CapEx? Broader economic signals, so things like interest rates, consumer spending, manufacturing output, and then puts that together and says, based off of these patterns, this is where we anticipate things will go.
Sure.
So it's based off history as well as what we're seeing currently. And that's what Andy and his team does so well. But you're right to say that, business owners need to be able to do that to some extent themselves within, that's the broader look, but within their own organization. I mean, your
Hmm.
forecast would be based at least partially off of a broader industry forecast. So for you also, you'd look at past patterns, where things currently are, what are your customers telling you, and what does the broader industry look like? So I'll give you an example. Wide format providers who invested in automation during downturns were better positioned for growth when demand picked back up, right? So what we do is our forecasts blend the survey data, again, from the dedicated research panels, the secondary economic data, to be able to provide some actionable insight. So really, it's also positioning it as, to come back to where I started, where it's not a crystal ball, but it does provide you better odds of making the right bet on the future. So I think that's a good way to think about it.
Great. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the upcoming Printing United Expo, which is happening October 22nd to 24th in Orlando. I know you will be there, and the whole research and economic team, I expect, will be represented in some way. So can you give us a rundown of how people can interact with or learn from that team at the event?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of sessions across a wide variety of topics. One example would be unlocking the power of print customer insights to drive sales, right?
Mhm.
That's a session that we're offering. Efficiency Unleashed, exploring automation in wide format printing. That's another one that would be relevant to your listeners. So we're doing a state of the industry. So harnessing business investment to drive profitability and competitive advantage, and then a bunch of other ones as well. And I do want to also say that we talked a bunch about AI, Dan. So we will have the AI study printed and available. There's a new AI pavilion that I'm not sure if you've mentioned yet to your readership that, yeah, will be new to this year, which shows you how important we feel the topic is. We're going to be presenting a couple of different sessions at the AI pavilion on the AI study. It
Mhm.
will be available, printed and available to take there. Encourage your folks to come. We would love to interact with you and hear your questions, hear your experiences. There's a whole bunch of opportunities. You would see my name or the name of the team that we mentioned when you take a look at the education agenda, and we'd love to see you at any of the presentations we'll be giving.
Fantastic. Well, Nathan Safran, thanks so much for talking to me today, and I look forward to seeing you in Orlando.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
You've been listening to the Wide Format Impressions broadcast. You can find more great content at wideformatimpressions.com.